Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Doing Good is Simple show. I'm your host, Chris Marlowe, and I'm very excited to have my good friend and want to help one of our longest supporters, Charles Lee, on the show. Charles, welcome, brother, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure.
Always, man. We've got about 15 years of history that we're going to talk about, and so much of the history is connected to doing good and making a difference. And I'm very, very excited about it. Just a reminder for everyone, the premise of this 10-week podcast series is very simple. I wrote a book called Doing Good is Simple. And a lot of people, when they hear the title, they're like, yeah, Marlo, I don't know if I agree with that. It feels like doing good is very complicated. So we're just going through it chapter by chapter and asking ourselves, is doing good simple, and can we make a difference in the world? And I want to read a quote from one of my favorite theologians, a guy named John Wesley. You might have heard about him, but if you haven't, Google him. He's got an amazing history of doing good and making a difference. And here's what theologian John Wesley said: do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can. And I think that sums up the heart behind the book, the heart behind Help One Now, the heart behind the message. Like, can we make a difference? And at the end of the day, do we have agency to make a difference? So Charles, man, thank you for being here and welcome. And let's jump in and talk about the Red Sox versus the Yankees. No, I'm just kidding.
There's nothing to talk about.
Nothing to talk about. For those who don't know, Charles and I love baseball, and tomorrow's opening season, and for the next 200 days, every day we will text back about how much we hate each other's team. And so there's always that. So Charles, I wanted to just quickly ask you a question. You have such a fascinating background. You've been in the pastoral space, you've been a professor, you're an entrepreneur, but one theme that you've always held in each category is you've always brought people together, and you've always had a mission kind of behind everything that you were doing. So as we kind of build out this framework today, the first question I have for you is, whenever people have big dreams, and kind of the whole point of this chapter is that in 2008, we had this big dream to start an organization. You and I had just met each other through Twitter. That's when Twitter was fun and enjoyable.
And social, yeah.
Yeah, and it was life-giving. And actually, it's funny because when I say some of my best friends in the world I met through Twitter or through Facebook or through Instagram. And that's kind of the positive of the social media world. I remember you coming down to Austin and hanging out with my family, and the kids were small, and Help One Now was just getting started. And, we had these big dreams, but we were really, really worried about the risk that was going into our lives. We were kind of leaving everything on the line. So for everyone watching today, it's so interesting because when you talk about making a difference in the world, when you talk about chasing your own dreams, there's this big risk associated, because just because you want to make a difference doesn't mean there aren't challenges. So I would love for you to kind of, with your background, talk a little bit about how and why is it important to take risk, and how have you taken risk, and like maybe some wisdom around risk taking as people watching this chase their dreams in their life.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think foundationally, there's, you could risk something and go after something, but I think the big differentiator between the pathway is a person who has a sense of purpose and at least some general direction versus those who don't and are trying to just figure stuff out. So I'm going to talk about the first category of person, which is someone like you at the start of Help One Now, at least had a direction and a vision. And it doesn't have to be 100% clear, but you had a sense of direction. Yeah. And so I think in those cases, I always think of when it comes to risk taking is that I'm a firm believer that I think taking risk is very good, but it has to be very calculated. So the way that I think about risk even today is like, how do I identify and assess the potential risk, whether it be in my personal life, professional, it may be an operational risk for an organization, or financial, or it may be a brand or reputational risk. And I think really asking like, what's at stake for me in pursuing this? So when I started the company, I knew that what was at stake is a livelihood. What was at stake was, constrained time. all of these kinds of things. And so in order to like assess it, I think people have to do their homework so that it becomes, you kind of transfer from just going after a dream to actually making some calculated moves that help you get to the dream.
I love
So
that. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, and I think a big part of that is just kind of prioritizing it and moving it to a calculated risk, and prep where you can, take action, test it out, monitor the progress, and really review it, because I think it's always good to people don't talk about this as much, but when I think about risk, you have to tie it to some level of objectives, KPIs or key performance indicators, and some measurable outcomes you could have as milestones, so you know if you're making progress or not.
So I want to talk about that for a little bit, because one of the things that's interesting, and we'll talk into the kind of the doing good portion in
Mhm.
just a second, but talk a little bit about how do we figure out how to be calculated in a world that's drowning us with information. And
Yeah.
so if it's like you can scroll on any social media app and hear from 1,000 different voices, 1,000 different opinions.
Yeah.
How do we navigate what it means to be calculated in this day and age? How do you, because I know you're connected to so many themes as well, how do
Yeah.
you navigate that in the world of so much information?
Yeah, I think when there's so much information, so much distraction, so much like rabbit trails, I think resisting the urge to try to figure out everything at the beginning, and going back to my point about purpose and direction,
Yeah.
I think if you have clarity around where you want to go, and you don't have to have all the answers, you don't have to read everything that's out there. I think that'll set you on the at least the right course, sort of like that, an illustration of like, even if you're going in a particular direction, even if you're off
Yeah.
like 1 degree, you may end up in a completely different place. So I think doing the hard work of understanding, like if you're going after something, is it like a desirable idea? Is it an idea that's actually feasible given the resources that you currently have? And thirdly, is it a viable idea? Is there sustainable some type of sustainability that's built into your idea, so that eventually if it comes to life, it's not an idea that dies because you run out of resources, or it
Mm.
doesn't have a business model behind it. So I think that's all part of it is, what are some things you can do to get rid of some of the noise?
Yeah.
Who are the main people that's helping to shape a particular area of interest? And then do the work of finding voices and individuals that can help you along the way, that can help you continue to clarify, not give you more options about where you want to go.
So Charles, when you think about it in the help one now world or in the doing good world, you've done so many practical things that have made a huge difference in the world. Um, how and why does it feel so challenging in this day and age to take risk to do good and to make a difference? And I guess one of the themes that we're trying to like kind of navigate in each of these episodes is we talk to so many folks that want the world to be better. They
Yeah.
want the world to be more beautiful. They feel this like, what is going on? That we're angry at one another. Everything's complicated. I can't figure out who to trust, but I want to take a risk. I want to do something.
Mhm.
How does a person who's listening and watching this episode understand? How do we prioritize the importance of taking a risk and loving your neighbor better in this day and age? Because it's not
Yeah.
easy. I think when we first started, it felt easier to love
Yeah.
people, and now actually it truly is.
Yeah.
There's a cost that goes with serving these days that
Yeah.
people have to think through.
Yeah. I think this may be a different way of approaching this topic is, I think figuring out ways how you're going to choose love over anything else. I always think of it like I try to sit down and think about this. I think one is, um, I don't think people do this enough, is we have to remove ourselves as the primary character in our story.
Mm.
And that's really hard to do. In other words, like, if I'm the center of my story, then so many things are latched on to how I perform, how I love, how I live a generous life.
Yeah.
And I think that self-centeredness reduces our potential to love. A good example of this is years ago, I was working with some of the top like nonprofit leaders
Yeah.
that came together. in the name of collaboration, mutual learning, and such. And it was a room full of some of the most notable nonprofits in the world. And I think there was an aha moment when one of the chief marketing officers for one of the groups said, I've just come to the realization that we made our organization the center of our universe and not the issue,
Mm.
which means
That's
that,
really good. Can you say that again? That's really,
yeah,
really good.
that as a nonprofit, we made the center of our universe our organization and not the issue.
Mm.
Because when you're the center of your universe, your organization, or you as a person,
Yeah.
when we put ourselves in the center, suddenly everyone else is like a supporting character to our
Mm.
story.
Yeah.
And we no longer think about what is it that we really want to do that benefits the world. And it becomes more about how can I do this? And I think that I in the center is the greatest distractor and obstacle to expressing the purest form of love.
Yeah.
And then if you are in the center, it's really hard to be empathetic towards those you're trying to help, and trying to understand someone before winning an argument, winning a perspective, because winning has more to do with our self-advancement than the greater good. So
Yeah.
it's hard to do the greater good when once again we're in the center, and that decreases empathy, decreases our ability to think about the issue, not ourselves. And
Mm.
then lastly, I think, the way we choose in the midst of this kind of noisy world is we kind of, I'm a firm believer that you got to force behaviors of generosity through your
Mm.
thoughts and your resources until it becomes second nature. So it may feel like non-authentic in the way that we
Yeah.
give, but when there's an opportunity to give, I usually say, hey, when in doubt, give.
Mm.
Because I think generosity is usually contagious. It develops good muscle memory for us as
Yeah.
individuals, and then it's rarely opposed by even our enemies. So I think these are some ways I think about, like, how do we make it a more loving, unified world? Is I think
Yeah.
that the key is we have to remove ourselves. I think that's like the interesting thing is how do you do good? You got to figure out a way to get out of the center of the story.
And kind of what you were talking about is exactly what John Wesley, the quote I mentioned, do all the good you can to all the people you can, just do good and make that a second nature. And it feels like,
Yeah.
Charles, what you're saying is like, when I get the opportunity to bring light and hope into the world, I'm going to take that opportunity. Right.
Right.
So you and your wife are awesome. You guys have been longtime supporters of Help One Now. You've served on the board. You brought together so many nonprofits in collaborative ways. Can you go back to like maybe the original and initial desires you had to make the world better? I know you started some conferences. You were a
Yeah.
pastor. Let's dig a little deeper. Like, why is it so important for you and Tina to do good and make a difference in the world? Because one of the things I'm searching for at this stage of my life is folks and if you ever read the greats who have changed the world, they've always had, the key to changing the world is the longevity of it, like staying in the game long enough. And it's so easy to jump in the game and like want to make a difference and then realize there's complexity to it, and then to jump out of the game. You and Tina have stayed in the game. How have you done that? Why is that so vital for you two?
I think it's really rooted in our understanding that doing good in the world is kind of our life mission. So whether it is helping our clients live out what they hope to execute, whether it's supporting nonprofits that are thinking not only strategically, but really with deep empathy for the people that they serve. I feel like that's part because life is so short, and we're all getting older, and my perspective has grown over the years, and we're like, hey, when it's like our life is going to go by so quick, we don't know when the expiration date is for life. And so in the short time we're given, that forces reprioritization on things that matter. And when I think about all the things that matter is at the end of the day, it's not prestige, it's not reputation, it's not
Yeah.
titles, it's not what our client portfolio looks like. I think what matters most is were we able to contribute to the world in a way that's meaningful, in a way that could be sustainable and lasting. And so we've created a means by which we do that. So it's not just haphazard. I hope we can stay
Yeah,
generous.
yeah,
That's why, whether building a family foundation or figuring out strategic ways to give to organizations, that's just kind of forced living. That means,
yeah,
hey, let's live a little bit underneath the means by which we could live.
yeah.
It's saving more, it's doing more. And so that's been kind of our perspective. And we feel like that's more satisfying than just accumulating wealth and reputation and somehow, because none of us can take it to the grave.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, I always say this, you don't do good by accident. Like it takes some intentionality. And it's interesting every week we've talked about this. Like we have a plan for finance and for business and for family and for fitness and for vacations. But one of the things we often don't have a plan for is like legacy and
Yeah.
how am I going to make a difference? And one of the things we want to remind everyone is like become intentional, plan out how you're going to do that, build it into your life rhythm so you can naturally live out the John Wesley quote. You wake up and your life is just doing good by the very nature of how you planned it. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Charles, I know you're a risk taker, and I know for those of us who take risk, even calculated risk, there's also failure.
Mhm.
There's no way. When I think about Helpful Now, and when we started the org in 2009, we were faced with this incredible amount of risk. Just starting a nonprofit's hard enough. Starting a nonprofit in the middle of a global economic meltdown that we were in is hard. Matter of fact, one of the ways I actually found out about you is you wrote an article on burnout and how you had literally burnt out and you had literally a medical scenario because you were working so hard. So I know you take risk. I also know you've had to deal with failure. Can you just talk a little bit about how and the framing for me is like if you're going to make a difference, you're also going to fail. It's okay to fail. Failure has to be a part of like life, and it's a matter of how you deal with that failure. So how have you dealt with failure? And just talk about in
Yeah.
general, like how do we manage failure in this world?
Yeah, I think I'm getting better the older I am. I think because of my personality and such, failure's never been easy. Being a child of immigrants, and my parents taught me that you have to achieve. We sacrificed everything to come here, and we really need to make it somehow. And so I think that survival instinct makes it more difficult for people like me to fail.
Yeah.
But as I've grown older, I would say like how I deal with failures. One is I have to, as soon as something doesn't that goes awry, I have to face the music. So I've learned over time how to run to failure and not away from it. And what I mean by that is I immediately will like verbalize, I'll acknowledge it, I'll accept it. If it had to do with something with our team, I will communicate it, take responsibility. And it's not like taking like endless self blame, but really thinking about like, at that point, how can I assess this? Were there things that were in my control versus those that I could not have influence? And then I always remember like any type of failure that I experience is this too will pass. I think I've lived
Yeah.
long enough where I know that no matter how incredibly, dramatic I felt about a failure at a moment in time, as the days and months and years go by, suddenly it gives it more context. So that's always good to just remind myself, like maybe a pep talk, this too will pass.
Yeah.
And then I, go out of my way to try to articulate it in writing or talk with someone about it. And then that's where I feel like I could practice some level of like self-compassion. Like, are there things that I can celebrate about the effort I just put in?
Mm.
And can I
Yeah.
set a plan on how to actually move forward? And the end goal is like, how can I learn from this and build upon it? And I may make the same mistake in the future, but I think that commitment to make it a little bit better next time, I
Yeah.
think is what will help us really become better people in the long run.
Charles, it feels like, what, even listening to this conversation, but of course, spending so much time with you in the last 15 years, you've always done a great job of being centered, reflecting, being intentional. And yet you're incredibly busy. I mean, you're a husband, you're a father, you're involved in, you're company has all kinds of crazy things going on. All the you're always on a plane. He chooses American Airlines, not Delta. That's a whole other question, everyone. LAX thing, I guess,
That's
but
tough, man.
I'm sorry about your delays, Charles. I'm so sorry about them. But man, when it's all said and done, like, how are you staying centered and
Yeah.
also so busy? Because one thing I want people to hear when they listen to these stories is like, you can be ambitious, you can chase dreams, but man, if you don't do it well, you also
Mhm.
may literally destroy your life. Or I talk about all the time how to get out in front of regret. You just mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're moving so fast, we wake up and we're 55 and we're like, wait a minute, like I didn't do the things I really wanted to do. Now it's too late. So how do you stay centered and focused in the midst of like the busyness of life?
Yeah, and once again, like I was not good at this in my 20s, 30s, maybe even part of my 40s.
Mm,
But now that I've entered kind of my 50s, I would say that I feel less guilt of making time for myself. So whether that's like daily increments where I don't feel the need to always be on top of everything,
yeah.
whether it be, even if it's like 20, 30 minutes,
Yep.
I feel okay. When things cancel on my calendar, I'm not rushing to fill that with activity. So those kinds of things have helped me like remind myself. And then I think, it sounds very simple, but my wife and I walk a lot.
Mm,
I play sports. I'm on several different teams for different sports, and that forces me to detach from the stress of the day to day.
yeah.
And some may say that's more tiring, but I'm like, I realize like that gives me the energy where I'm in a group where people don't see me as a, leader of a company or,
Mhm.
speaker or what have you. We're just kind of friends playing basketball or baseball or those kinds
Yeah.
of things. So I think that keeps me somewhat grounded with
Yeah.
people that not that they don't care about what I do, but
Yeah.
in that moment, we're just trying to do a
Yeah.
common goal right in front of us, win a game or something like that. So I think that's where I
Yes.
feel the rooting, rootedness, and then walking with my wife. We're fortunate to live in Southern California, so we could walk year around, go to the beach. I think those kinds of things, like seeing things that are bigger than my current context, like the
Mm,
ocean or the
yes.
mountains, is super life giving. And I
Yeah.
think that those have been like lifesavers for
Yeah.
myself and our relationship as well.
Yeah, Nicole and I are in the same boat. Like we don't live in Southern California, but we do walk a lot and we do trying to refocus a lot and just try and
Yeah.
reframe life again and again. I want to talk about mentorship. You have always been one to mentor others. Matter of fact, you led a conference called the Ideation Conference, which
Mhm.
and your company is called Ideation. One of your passions is to help people's dreams, is to execute those dreams so they can become real. Talk about the importance of um, having mentors in your life and
Yeah.
also at the same time mentoring others as well, because it feels like I don't know if there's anything more important in life outside of family structure than investing in other humans who have
Yeah.
potential to do good and to make a difference. And so when I think of Help One Now, we're starting the ideation conference. Literally was our first group of people who helped us get going outside of our original Austin kind of friends.
Yeah.
And some of those people are still great friends and we still support each other, and it created some incredible impact. You've always built a culture of connection, collaboration, and mentorship. Why and how have you done that?
Yeah. For me, I think mentorship is like the greatest hack we have
Mm,
to us in growth, because I think it accelerates growth for human
yeah,
beings. I think if you view mentorship as another commitment, it can be a burden you take on. But mentors provide like these practical insights, advice that they may or may not help you contextualize your own context, but they sure speed it up
yeah, yes,
if
yeah,
you're willing to listen. And so I think that's like one of the greatest benefits is like they provide helpful frameworks. There are people who have experienced some of the things you experience, or they may not be, but they have lived experience.
mm,
And I feel like as long as we're open to mentorship, it's probably one of the kind of the secret weapons. I don't know of any great leader that doesn't have mentors. I don't know
yeah,
of any great leader that doesn't seek the advice of whether it's their peers or those that have come before them. And so I feel like it's a necessity for life. And once you get to that point, you're like, this is like you know, you could either choose to cut off that lifeline and never get a mentor,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you could choose to just kind of plug into whoever that is or a group of people. And that's really uh, the power of mentorship. And I can't speak highly enough about it, because you just need someone who's outside of your context to give you a bigger perspective, to say
Yeah.
it's going to be okay, but have you considered X, Y, and Z? Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've called you a lot of times. You're like, it's going to be okay. Relax, Marla. Just relax. It's going to be okay. We got this. Talk about having mentorships even as you age, because I think it's easy to be
Yeah.
like, oh, I've succeeded, I've arrived, but like mentorship never ends, right? Like you, as someone in the
Yeah.
50s, I'm still looking for mentors. Who's going to help me get to the next level? So I think one of the things I want to encourage people, if you're younger watching this, find a mentor. As you age, help mentor others, but also don't think you don't need to still be mentored. Charles, are you
Correct.
still seeking mentorship even at this stage in your
Yeah.
career?
I'm pretty good. And I think I'm fortunately disciplined enough to, whenever I see people, whether I know them really closely or not, I'm always seeking opportunities to schedule something with them. And I'm the type of guy where I'll schedule things 6 months, a year in advance if that
Yeah.
person's busy.
Yep.
So I'm like, when's the first opening you have on your calendar? And I don't mind asking questions like that, because I
Yeah.
think it forces, one, they know that I'm serious about it. I'm willing to wait.
Yeah.
And so being able to maximize time, whether it's 15 minutes or several hours with a mentor, for me, that's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, if I see somebody and they don't have to mentor my entire life, it may be an area of business, it may be an area of family, or being, being a better husband, or thinking about
Yeah.
my
Yep.
own, like, what does the next season of my life look like? And I'm super fortunate that I've met so many great people, but it took me initiating the conversation, because mentors they're usually really busy people, or they're
Yeah.
people who have a lot on their plate. So they're
Yep.
not going out necessarily, other than people in their, close proximity, to go mentor. So
Yeah.
if you want to reach out, reach out. And I've tried to do the same, like when I go speak somewhere to young professionals or
Yeah.
middle management folks.
Yeah.
Often they'll say, "Hey, let's connect," and I'll always try to. I don't think
Yeah.
there's a request that I haven't taken
Hmm.
at some point. It may take time to get together,
Yeah.
but I'm like, hey, if I could help someone else in their journey and encourage them,
Yeah.
definitely will.
Yeah, I love that, Charles. I do want to encourage people when we think about doing good and making a difference. Often we can go right to like some of the programmatic or the real big issues:
Yeah,
homelessness and anti-trafficking, orphan care, global development. And one of the biggest ways you can make a difference in the world is just to mentor someone who
absolutely.
needs your help, your leadership, your guidance, your support. Just someone who you can help recenter when the world gets wonky. And so help others achieve what you want to achieve, and then never stop pursuing mentorship. Charles, you wrote a book, which feels like a long, long time ago. And I
It
know you may
was.
be writing another book. Isn't it crazy?
Yeah,
Your book came out, I think, right before mine. And
yeah.
good ideal now what? And the whole
Uh-huh.
premise of the book basically is how do you bring your ideals to life? And so I know part of that is you know with ideation, the consultant group that you lead on strategy. Your goal is to see the future and to kind of help people achieve their futuristic goals for the organization. When you
Yeah.
think about the future of doing good, as you've been doing it so intentionally for over 20 plus years, and I know the organizations that you've helped are some of the most well-known, impactful organizations, from water to anti-trust,
Mhm.
all like. This isn't a question. I wanted you to do this live. Like I didn't include this question because I wanted it to be real and raw. But man, what do you think the future of doing good is as you process the last 15, 20 years and look to the next 15 or 20 years?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know how much of that will change, because generous people will stay generous.
Mm.
I think there will, like, to your point, I think generosity has to be super intentional and planned to the extent that you can.
Yep.
And that way you're not just reacting to a need, but when there's a need, you don't have to think about whether or not you should be generous. So if there is something, a natural disaster or some horrific event, I think if we have the funds set aside, to give towards that, it's a lot easier choice. So that intentionality actually frees up your ability to give more
Yeah.
broadly. Is it going to be? I think the world will continue to be polarized. I think there will be policies put in place that prevent some strategic ways of
Mm.
actually doing good.
Yeah.
But that's just going to be the new reality of our world.
Yeah.
But the good news is, like, to some of our conversation is, um, we could always help a neighbor.
Yeah.
We could always help, things that are happening locally, as well as things that are happening a lot far more complex globally.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to run out of opportunities to contribute in meaningful ways to the world.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I would say, even in the midst of like financial uncertainty or economic uncertainty,
Yeah.
I just encourage people, like, to the extent that you can, maybe it's money, maybe it's time,
Yeah.
but I think we could embed opportunities of doing good into our calendar and
Yes.
plan for it,
Yeah.
save for it, sign up for something, vote, do all the things that are within our means.
Yeah.
So I think there's 1,000 different ways we could continue to do good in our world. And I think the good news is, like, there's like plenty of people that are like-minded in the
Mm.
way we think about good.
Yep.
So that's encouraging. So I hope that, we continue to
Yeah.
do so.
Yeah, no, that's super encouraging. And this is going to be my final question, and you may be even an extension of that. But
Mhm.
as you think about the future, and you think about even kind of your life and next stages, what is bringing you hope to dream big about the future of the world, and even your life in the world, and how you can give back?
Yeah. I still believe in humanity.
Mm.
I still believe that
Yeah.
there's a collection of human beings around the world
Yeah.
that will stay rooted in their values and desire to help their fellow human being. And so that gives me hope. No matter how crazy, whether or not you align with certain, political perspectives. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, especially here in the U.S. I really feel like, no matter the context of the uncertainty that we live in, there's always certainty in the fact that if we can love better, if we can do good, and if we can stay generous,
Mm.
our world will eventually right the direction.
Yeah.
And it's not a religious perspective. I think it's
Mhm.
just like a human reality that if we can love, and if we can, continue to give and help each other out when we need help and
Yeah.
ask for help,
Mm.
I think it's a powerful environment in which good will thrive. I still believe that.
Yeah, thank you, brother. And I think every day I wake up and I ask myself, why?
Mhm.
Why am I still doing this work? It's so complicated, so difficult, so hard.
Yeah.
Um, and I think what you just said is the why. That I still believe in humanity. That I still spend time with the most generous people here in the States, with the most brilliant leaders all over the world. We still spend time with kids who have dreams to, they live in the middle of a barrio or a township, and they want to be a doctor or an astronaut or a soccer player. Or these families who want to launch a business and just make a difference and provide for their own kids, so they don't have to wait for help now to help them. There's so many people that have so many dreams. And it feels like the more time I spend with those folks, the more unified we are, the more connected we are, and the more we have in common than we imagine. So for me, it's getting off social, it's getting out of the media, it's getting away from kind of the wild content, and setting a table and listening to people and realizing, like, wow, we actually are super connected, and we really care about one another, and we really want to help each other. It just takes a little intentionality to do that. So, friends, thank you so much for hanging out and watching this episode. Charles, you've been such a good friend, such a good mentor. You've been in the Help One Now board. You've been such a huge part of everything that Help One Now is doing, and so many other organizations. So thank you for your life, the way you've given back, and thanks for being a part of the Doing Good is Simple show.
Thanks for having me,